What's up, guys? I'm Ann Blackwood, your Silicon Valley Sage Sister, here to bring consciousness to the forefront of your daily life to make life a little kinder and simpler. And today I want to talk about one of my favorite things. Jeez Louise, what is with people? This is gonna be an interesting ride. So, awake, not woke. Why? Why awake, not woke? I always thought it was cool because I started saying that, awake, not woke. And then JP Sears, Awaken with JP, made a t-shirt that says awake but not woke. And I thought that was so cool. Other people have been picking it up. And there's a reason why those of us who are actually awake have such an aversion to the term woke. And I felt it from the very beginning. I could see that even though from the outside, these people were doing some of the same things that they had seen other people in the spiritual community do, and it could just be that they're beginners, but what I started to realize was the intention. The intention wasn't there. These people were doing it for all of the wrong reasons. And in doing so, they were doing all of the outside facade things with none of the inner things. And that's part of how you can tell if someone's awake and not woke. Because if you're a good person, you don't have to tell someone you're a good person. It's obvious you're a good person. That's where all of this virtue signaling is so funny. And why you'll see the deepest spiritual people not get down with all of this virtue signaling. Because, as I've said before, if you're humble, you don't have to tell somebody you're humble. If you're good, you don't have to tell somebody you're good. Because it's obvious from who you are, what your actions are on a regular basis. So it's really interesting to me, because what I started to notice, for instance, is like yoga rather than meditation and Pilates became the cool woke thing to do, because you were able to do something spiritual while still being able to avoid any of that inner work. Because if you do meditation, even guided meditation, it's going to start to force you to do some of that inner work. Although guided meditation is one of the few that you might be able to get away with not doing some inner work, depending on which ones you do, because you can get caught up in the listening of the meditation and not do any of the diving inward. So that's why things like yoga and Pilates ended up being the cool thing to do as a woke person, just putting on a facade for the world, because you could do something spiritual, yoga coming from the spiritual community, without having to go within. And that's really what it is, if you look at it. Like, in the grand scheme of things, you don't actually have to be a good person. You just have to look like you're a good person. That's what virtue signaling is all about, which is why so many people who are actually awake, are so against all of the wokeness and the virtue signaling. And one of the ways that you can tell is that when you come down to the conversations, it's become cool to bully people. In this particular culture, it's never cool to bully anybody, no matter what you think your justification is. I'm sorry. It's not okay. And what I found interesting the most most about this was that I will get bullied for trying to have a thoughtful, constructive conversation, and will try to come at it from a place of thoughtfulness, and I'll get name called. For instance, people will be calling me names, or just repeating stuff that they've heard. But that's part of how you can tell that those who say they are woke are not actually awake. Because people who are awake, they don't do that aggressive social justice warrior bully crap. That's not to say that you can't disagree. That's not to say that you can't even maybe get a little aggressive in your disagreeing. But you're not going to find name calling like my video. I think my video about why I don't like the term Karen has gotten the most views of my entire YouTube channel, other than maybe my group meditations that I did with people all over the world. And I find it hilarious because I talk about how I don't like the term Karen, because we shouldn't be calling people names, we shouldn't be bullying people, we shouldn't be resorting to that childish behavior. And what do I get in the comments? People calling me names and bullying me in the very same way that I'm calling it out. It just blows my mind because they're feeling called out. And when these people feel called out, they feel the need to call others out because they don't have any of the inner work done to have a constructive conversation to sort out our differences. But here's the thing. The reason why that's happening is because these conversations are being discouraged. Like, the real conversations that need to be had are being discouraged. But if you want to be able to build an understanding, you've got to have these conversations. Even if they're messy, you've got to be able to ask questions, even if they seem messy, because the only way to create that relatability, to build understanding, is by having the conversations and asking questions. So that's another way that you can tell whether someone's awake or woke. Because someone who is actually awake has done enough inner work to be able to have a conversation and not take offense. Because they're about the learning and the growing and the expansion. And they understand that the only way in which someone can learn is through a conversation. The only way you can learn is through learning. You can't learn without, So here's the other thing that I want to state right here. Is there is a difference between absorbing something as it is and actually learning it. So there is a difference between memorizing something and being able to just parrot it and actually learning. These people don't want you to learn anything. Mostly because if you were to learn anything, you'd learn that they were the ones who were ignorant, but so be it. But they don't want you to learn anything. They just want you to parrot back what they've said. And that's because that's how they are. They're not actually learning anything. They're not inquiring. They're not asking questions. They're just taking in someone else's belief system. They're just taking in someone else's agenda as their own and parroting it back out to everybody else without thinking about it, without asking questions. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy. Why did I know that guy was going to do that? I am so lucky that that dude did not hit me. conversations, because that's how you actually learn. It's funny because my favorite psychology teacher, all of the rest of the students didn't like him. Like, they kind of liked his personality, but they hated him for the way he tested. And that's because he tested in a way in which made you actually have to learn the material rather than just memorize something for a moment to regurgitate it. And that's what I loved about him. Probably partly because I already understood the curriculum. It was not my first Psych 101 class. It was just my first Psych 101 class at this particular college. I loved him so much because he actually wanted you to learn the material. He wasn't just trying to get you to memorize it for long enough to regurgitate it on a test. He was actually trying to teach people something. And I loved that. I absolutely loved it. Because we need more of that in this world. We need more investigative spirit. You should never, no matter how right you think someone is, you should never take something and just accept it. Honestly and truly. Like, you want to think about it. You want to chew on it. You want to investigate it, if possible, depending on what it is. But you should never, especially if it comes down to what you're saying your belief system is. Like, you shouldn't fear whether or not people can tell you're a good person if you're a good person. The only people who have to fear people wondering if they're a good person or not are the people who aren't good people. And so it makes me sad that there are good people who fall for this trap. Or maybe they're not good people. Maybe I'm making the assumption that they're good people and they're not. I don't know. Maybe there's something about them I don't know. You know, and that's the thing, is I never want you to take what I say and just accept it. Never, 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 never. Never. I want to inspire you to do your own research. That's all I ever want, is to be able to share with you what I found in hopes that I can inspire you to explore more. Because what I realize is that if you don't have someone to help you understand that it's out there to explore, you might never find it. I don't want anybody to just agree with what I say for the sake of doing so. If you disagree, I want to hear about why. And maybe, just maybe, I'll end up agreeing with you. Because I want to learn and I want to grow, and I know that I'm a human being that is fallible and could be wrong about something. You know, I have definitely been wrong in my life. Let me tell you. I am very confident. But the reason why I am able to be so confident is because I know I don't know everything. And in me not fearing the unknown, because I don't stop to guess in a way that creates fear of what the just potentially not knowing something, but being wrong. I always invite the opportunity for me to be wrong with open arms, because I want to learn first and foremost, not be right first and foremost. So, you know, let me check my little notes here. So we've gotta be able to have these conversations, because at the end of the day, and this is your reminder for the day about this particular thing, because this I will say for certain, if you, in all earnesty, are coming from a place of wanting others to be happy, healthy, and fair, just because you don't agree with how that is achieved doesn't make you a bigot. It doesn't make you a racist. It doesn't make you any of that nonsense that they like to spout at people. It doesn't make you any of those names that they like to tear people down with. No way, no how, no sir. You are allowed to disagree with people. You are allowed to ask people honest questions. Because how in the heck are we going to learn to actually understand each other if we don't have conversations with each other? And this is the last thing I'll note when it comes to this, is you can tell who's awake and who's woke based on who's comfortable getting their information about other people, not from the source. This is one of the things I always challenge my friends on, and hope all of my friends will challenge me on, which is citing your sources, which includes not taking the news's word necessarily, the news media's word, or somebody else's word about something, but actually getting to the source. Because especially when it comes to things like, I don't know, an entire racial population, you don't think there are going to be differing views in populations of millions of people? Come on now. If I had a nickel for every time I heard all white people think this way, all black people think this way, I would be an illionaire. Bet you never heard that word, illionaire. Well, maybe if Amy's watching this, because she's who I got it from. An illionaire. Not a millionaire, not a billionaire, an illionaire. And let me tell you, I talk to a lot of people. My next official sanctuary video is going to be about my experience on Clubhouse. And boy, do I have a lot to say about that. But there are plenty of white people who think differently than other white people. And there are plenty of black people that think differently than other black people. So, you know, you shouldn't stereotype people in general, and you shouldn't be taking any information about anything from anything other than the source itself. An exception to that would maybe be, a study. But that might actually be the best source, because they're getting the information from the source. So a study would be a good communication channel, like an official double-blind sort of study would be a great communication channel between you and the source. Because at the end of the day, as I like to say, as I came up with recently, we transcend labels, we transcend stereotypes, we transcend boxes, we do not transcend reality. And that's the thing, is even if a stereotype is true to some degree, that doesn't mean the majority fits the stereotype. They might have at one point, or it might have not been the majority that created the stereotype. It might have been the minority. It might have been the loudest minority rather than the silent majority that the stereotype was created about. We can transcend stereotypes. We don't have to grow up to fit in their boxes. And one of the amazing ways to do that is to transcend their labels. And that's part of how you can tell whether or not, to wrap this up, someone is woke or awake. Because someone who is obsessed with labels, and I don't mean clothing labels, I mean personal labels. Someone who's obsessed with pronouns, not respect someone's pronouns, but obsessed with pronouns. Someone who is obsessed with labeling people, white, black, European, American, Asian, African, vaccinated or not vaccinated, mentally ill or not mentally ill. The people who are obsessed with the labels, that's how you can tell. Because I'm not even obsessed with calling people woke or awake. I apparently the term woke was misappropriated from African American culture. I didn't know that. I don't know much about it, but that's what I was told. But you can tell whether or not someone is awake, actually awake or not, based on whether or not they are virtue signaling and therefore concerned with whether or not you think they're a good person. Like to, an annoying degree. And whether or not they're concerned with labeling people and stereotyping people and putting people in boxes. Because someone who is awake is working to transcend those things and not transcend reality. I talk about this when you transcend the ego. I have a whole video on this. The concept of transcending the ego isn't killing the ego, it's about maturing the ego. And it's the same thing when it comes to everything else that has to do with transcending the ego. We're not killing it, we're learning to work with it. And it's a whole maturation process. So when I talk about transcending the boxes, that's not to say the boxes aren't useful. One of the things that drives me nuts is that we have these people out there who put in boxes that's not what I meant to say. Although it kind of works. What drives me nuts is these people out there who think that they are so unique they couldn't fit into any box. That bugs me. Because here's the thing. We as human beings, and you don't have to take my word for it, I do have a decent amount of education in psychology, but even still, I'd want you to research this for yourself. We as human beings, there are a bunch of unique characteristics that we can demonstrate. There are a lot of unique characteristics that we can have, but a human being, at the end of the day, can only be a combination of those unique characteristics. So there is going to be someone else out there, not exactly like you, but pretty darn close, enough that at the end of the day, and this is why psychology actually works, and why I haven't abandoned it altogether, is because at the end of the day, you can sit down and label all of these characteristics that human beings have, and every single human being is going to be made up of some of those characteristics. And you're not going to find one that has something that others don't. So yes, we as human beings are a unique amalgamation of a certain number of characteristics, but we all tick those boxes. And I guarantee you there will be somebody out there who also ticks those same boxes as you do. And they might express some of those things differently. But as I like to say, and you can tell who the people who aren't actually awake are because they get offended by this. Nobody's a snowflake. We are all ice cubes. Nobody is a snowflake. We are all ice cubes. We are not so unique. Because if we were actually that unique, no one would be able to relate to each other. Nobody would be able to understand each other. So, remember that. We are not snowflakes. We are not that unique. We are ice cubes. Anyway, just remember, there's a reason why I end every sanctuary video, this being a taste of the sanctuary video, with be brave, stay sane, stay curious, and be kind to each other. And that's because at the end of the day, I like to remind people that being brave is not doing what is socially acceptable. It is not brave to do something that is socially acceptable. Why? Because it's socially acceptable. It's not hard to do something that is socially acceptable because everybody will accept you for it. It is much harder to stand up for what you believe in when it's not socially acceptable. And that's what we've forgotten. That's what we've lost. Or that's what some people are holding on to, is they're acting like things that are completely socially acceptable are still not socially acceptable. But that's the problem, is we've won that battle. Stop trying to fight it. It blows my mind. There are so many people out there fighting battles we've already won. And sure, maybe it's not perfect for everybody, but living in a giant society, nothing will be. So, be brave, stay sane, always check in with yourself, but remember to check in with others too, because we are not the only one who can tell what's good for us. This is something I remind people about as well, and that's another way you can tell if someone thinks they're a snowflake or not. Isn't awake, or are they? Because I talk about the fact that, and if anybody who's had children can understand this, we as human beings don't always know what's best for us. Sometimes we as human beings can have instincts that are very bad for us. That's why I talk about the fact that intuition is different than instinct. Because you can learn bad instincts. And so, we as human beings can learn bad enough instincts to no longer be able to know what's best for us. And it's funny because that's another way you can tell about certain woke ideologies, is they bounce back and forth on whether or not you're a unique snowflake that only you can know what's best for you, or you're a unique snowflake but other people have to tell you what's best for you. I'm here to tell you, we as human beings do not always know what's best for us. You know what? Let me put that slightly differently. We as human beings can figure out what's best for us or not. However, at the moment, there are times where other people can know what's better for us than we do in the moment. And it might get to the point where we don't know what's best for us, where what would be best for us actually feels like what would be worse for us. And I can tell you, having experience with things like addiction and having friends who had addictions, we can learn bad instincts, and we can think what's bad for us is good for us and what's good for us is bad for us. So there are other people in the world who might actually know what's better for you than you do. I think that we, as human beings, have the inalienable right to have the last say as to what's right for us or not. But that's different than whether or not people might actually know what's better for us. I think we should have the last say no matter what, but there might actually be someone out there who knows what's better for you than you do. So that's stay sane. Check in with yourself. Check in with people you trust. Build a circle of trust. The next is stay curious. Because as I said in this, leading with questions before assumptions is the best way to be. So that's what we get with be curious. All of these things are going to weed out all of these things I say are things that help weed out whether or not someone's actually awake or not. Because you can tell those who aren't actually awake, especially those who seem to be the most woke, have this problem with people asking questions. Like, rather than understanding that if I'm asking a question, I want to relate to you. If I am curious enough, if I am willing enough to ask a question rather than just make an assumption, that means I'm trying to relate to you and understand you, and I'm trying to care about you. So never take offense to a question. Even if it's a question that seems obvious to you, even if it's a question that seems offensive to you, try not to take offense to a question, because it's a sign of a good person that they decided to ask a question rather than make an assumption, for starters. And second of all, like I just said, if someone's asking questions, that means they're trying to actually relate to you. And we cannot create a comprehensive understanding without being able to relate. And we can't learn to relate without asking questions. So be curious. Ask more questions than you assume anything. And last but not least, be kind to each other, or be kinder to each other, depending on the day. And, you know, like I said at the beginning of this, there is never a time when there is never a time when it's okay to be mean to somebody, to bully somebody, no matter what you think your justification is, no matter what you think you know. Be kind to each other. Be kinder to each other. Because if we can start doing that, we can start doing a lot of things that encompass making this world a better place. Being curious is being kinder to each other. Just an example. Being brave is even being kinder to each other, because it's always better to tell the truth and be honest than lie. So be brave, stay sane, stay curious, and be kind to each other. Be kinder to each other, because we all deserve a little more kindness. We all deserve that moment where people try to build an understanding with us rather than make assumptions about us. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me for this Taste of the Sanctuary video. If you're not already a Sanctuary member, go check it out on Patreon. These Taste of the Sanctuary videos gives you an idea of where I go with my Sanctuary videos. I have made the Sanctuary of the Awakened a place where I want people who are ready for growth and expansion, who are actually awake, to be able to feel comfortable, to be able to talk together, to be able to ask questions about the difficult stuff. The Sanctuary of the Awakened is just that. I want it to be a sanctuary for those who are actually awake. So you become a member by signing up on Patreon. You get all of the Patreon content. You get all of the sanctuary content as well as the other general Patreon content. And you get access to our Slack chat, which is the community where we all connect together, even despite me. Not to spite me, but despite me. Because I want us to all be able to connect. This isn't just about me. This is about us as a community having a place to connect. So, you can join the Sanctuary of the Awakened by signing up for the Sanctuary of the Awakened tier on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Yeah. And for more Taste of the Sanctuary videos, you can head over to Patreon and click the Taste of the Sanctuary tag as well. They are found here on YouTube. You can go to my Taste of the Sanctuary playlist. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm here. So that's what I've got to say. Go check out the links in the description. And may the energy you serve you well.